Hey, what's up? Liron here, and in this video I'm going to show you the process for creating a somewhat realistic watercolor painting using glazes and stages. I think you'll find this one really helpful. Let's get started. So I think we actually have a really fun process today. Now, I did skip the drawing stage, as you can see, but I will, as always, include a picture of the drawing stage so you can draw this one as exactly as I've drawn it. Now, I did not cut out the mixing because I want you to see how important this gets when you work this style. When you're aiming for a bit more realism, a little more accuracy, you want to make sure that you mix the right color and value. Now, mainly for the realistic impression, it's the value, but the color does matter if you do aim for a higher level of accuracy. Now, one more element is, in order to get even washes, you want to make sure that you mix enough. And I've mixed here plenty of color and made sure it's enough for me. Now, about this process, as we work in glazes, with every wash, you want to focus on one single element. My focus here is on the background and the grass. So all I'm going to do is cover this entire thing up, save for the highlights. Okay, anything I see that's a major highlight, I'm going to skip and paint around. But anything else, even if it's a mid value, even if it's kind of dark and it's not fully white, I'm going to paint over. Okay, the reason for that is to make it easier for myself. If I want to get that realistic impression, we want to divide our attention with every wash to a very limited utility, so to speak. So with this one, we do want to get that background wash. Now, the grass, my plan was to mix something that's as close to the green I see and then slightly vary it. So if you carefully look at my wash, I have a lot of green, obviously. I also have a lot of yellow, and I also have some red in it. Now, the colors I'm using, if you want to be more specific, are sap green, yellow ochre, a bit of pyrrole scarlet, so that's a fiery red, and just a bit of blue in there to neutralize. Okay, so these are the specific colors I'm using, and I find that as long as I'm close enough, it's going to be okay. So I try to nail that close enough look. To get the right color, get the right value. Now, value does turn into something very important here. You want to make sure that you do get it to be the grass to be as dark. And what I do is I also work from a black and white version of the reference photo. I find that to be really important. Okay, sometimes it's very hard, especially with strong saturated greens. Very often it will be hard to read the value you see. So take that picture, turn it black and white. If you're doing plein air, take a picture of the reference, turn it black and white on your phone. It's possible with most phones, and you'll get a better idea of how dark the colors are, because sometimes it's hard making that translation. Okay, now if you look at my grass, it's not perfect in terms of evenness, but it is even enough for me. Okay, it is even enough to get a point across, and once I put in the actual golf cart, it's all gonna blend into the distance. By the way, sorry about the camera moving. It's all gonna kind of blend into the distance. Now I'm working with the wash I already have there, and I'm slowly adding some more colors. So I'm adding a bit of burnt sienna, a bit of French ultramarine, a bit of sepia, just a bit of everything. Again, with this process, it is more important for me to nail those highlights properly, colors properly, because that's a big part of the realism as well. Okay. So, and you want to also pay attention to temperature and really closely observe the reference. What I noticed is that the golf cart itself has a bit of a coolness to it. So it is a bit more towards the blue bias, okay? Not completely, but a bit towards it. This is what my plan was. It's funny. So I decided to start actually with a bit of a warmer version of that blue and slowly cool it off as we move downwards. Why? Because the top of the card, I figured, will be more exposed to light, so you may get a bit more of a warmth there. And you will see now there is a bit of warmth to that blue mix, and you'll see as I move downwards, I add a bit more of the coolness and the actual blue, like you see right around here. Okay, now, evenness. You want to make sure that you get as even of a wash as possible. Now, it's not easy to read the reference and to really see where to put the shapes in. This is a complex subject. You know, you get all of these smaller details within it. You want to try and visualize the shape you're painting and really try and visualize it. And it took me some time to even get started on mixing because I spent quite a lot of time looking at the golf cart, looking at it, figuring out where the shape that I'm painting is exactly, okay? Because once you start applying the paint, the clock ticks, and you have to make sure you do things before it dries. Now, because there are some details within the shape, okay, the shape it's one main shape of these sort of neutral blues and burnt siennas, but there is some variance in it. There are some darker spots, there are some lighter spots. Because of that, you can get away with a bit of unevenness in the wash, but try and keep it to a minimum, okay? And I cannot stress enough how important it is to actually observe the reference, okay? It really does matter. Now, I'm not aiming at this glaze to get the accurate value yet. What I'm aiming for right now is to get the shape of the most basic dark value of the cart. So think about, I'm kind of averaging out the shape of the entire golf cart, and I'm figuring out what value is that I can apply to all of it. And that's the idea with glazes, and it's a point I wanted to mention before as well. With glazes, again, we're dividing our work in multiple layers because that helps us to be able to be more accurate, because all we have to focus on is the shape. I'm applying this thin glaze, and all I care about is the shape. You could get the grass in the background in two glazes if you'd gone too light at first. So if I'd gone with the first wash that's very light, and then I'd figure, oh, I need another glaze, that's perfectly fine. I recognize the opportunity to get it in one go, but the whole idea with glazes is you break off work into multiple stages, and you don't necessarily vary the values within a glaze too much, okay? It's just one more layer, one more layer, one more layer, and they're all fairly even in their values, okay? They're not equal in their values, but for within every glaze, you're aiming for evenness. So look at the entire thing now. It's all the same value. It's the same kind of neutral black, okay? And it's funny to say black. It's kind of gray, it's a bit blue, it's a bit burnt sienna, but the value is very close. And this allows me to focus on shape. And shape does become more important when you aim for that realism. You have to understand, it's kind of the devil is in the details deal. When you aim for realism, it's not binary, like there is the right way and the wrong way to do it. It's more about the more accurate you will be, the more realistic the result will be. Now, what's included in this accuracy? Values, colors and temperature, shape, okay? So the more accurate you can be in your shapes, in your values, in your colors, the more realistic of an impression you'll get. It's not binary. It's not either it's realistic or it's not. It's percentage. The more accurate you are, if you're 90% accurate, you'll be a little more you'll get a bit of a more of a realistic impression, okay? So it's the devil's in the details. Work on all of your skills and improve all of them one by one. The value matching, the colors, the temperature, all of that. Now, let's move on to the next stage. What you've seen me do now is pre-wet the area. Why? Because the previous wash is dry, and I want to get now a bit of that variation in value. Now with this glaze, I'm focusing on the darker spots, okay? And I did want to make sure that I get a smooth transition, so I pre-wet some areas very gently. When you put water over an existing dry wash, even though it's dry, you have to be minimal about it. If you try and meddle with it too much, you'll lift it back, especially if you're using cheaper paper and you want to avoid that. So just a light, thin coat of water without lifting, without scratching, and then I'm going into that with some paint. Now, I'm observing the reference and I'm trying to find the large areas that are darker. Okay, I'm looking for those large shapes that are darker, because if I'm gonna try and focus on each and every small shape there, it's borderline impossible, because there's so much going on in the golf cart. There are so many different parts to it. So I'm just searching for the main areas, okay? And I'm putting the darker paint there, and I'm using my sprayer, the water sprayer, to move it around a bit. So I have two means. Remember, you can blend edges by first pre-wetting, or you can blend them by applying the water sprayer to them and help them move, okay? So I'm using both ways. I'm using all means at my disposal. And all I care about is the general darker areas and nothing more than that, okay? Spray it a bit, help the paint move, get that even smooth transition, okay? And then you'll notice especially the bottom where the tires are and the cast shadow are a little darker. That's the main function of this wash for me, was to get the shadow up top, shadow in the middle, and then that shadow at the bottom of the tires. Again, not too, it is darker in value, but it's not too much darker. It's not too, it doesn't pop out too much, because remember, it's all confusion. Within the shadows, it's just one big confusion. You want to make sure that you get that effect across. We don't get to see too much in the shadows, which is good. We can get away with a lot of stuff. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Now you'll notice there's a part where I painted around. It's kind of the reflection. There is this, I don't know, metal piece on the side between the tires, between the front and back tires on the sides, that just reflects the grass. So how do I show this? By keeping the value light, and it's actually working in my favor because it does reflect the grass. So I get this nice little effect going. Now, while some of the areas are still wet, I can apply a bit more dark paint. And it will spread out a bit. You see, it's not going to be too strong and too harsh of an edge. So that's another good spot or point in time to do that kind of a thing, okay? With time, you'll learn it all. You'll learn everything about the timing, when you can do something, what result. You'll get this spidey sense, so to speak, that you know before you apply the paint, you know how it's going to behave on paper. And that's a really important part to the process, okay? And it's just something that, this is why I recommend people to just don't judge yourself. If you get results you don't like, don't judge yourself. Just focus on practicing. Just do another one and another one and another one. It's a sense you develop with time. It's kind of like sports, where the more you do this a certain sport like soccer or basketball or football, your muscle memory develops. You don't need to think about it. You just need to do it, okay? I hope that makes sense. It's really important. It's a nuanced point I don't talk about as much, but it is really something that happens automatically the more you paint. You get feedback. You put the paint and, you didn't get the result you want. You're like, okay, I messed it up. I thought something was going to happen and something else happened. You learn. You use this feedback and you naturally develop this skill, okay? So I hope that makes sense. Just paint as much as you can. Now what you saw me do is just add a bit of a light value to the tires there, to the thing above them. If you look at the reference photo, you'll see this, and it has this bluish cool tint to it, so I wanted to get that effect there. And within this reflective surface, there's also just a tiny bit of a darker spot that I wanted to get in. Now I cut out the opaque paint part of taking it out of the tube, but I have some green opaque paint. I believe this is called Pale Green by Shinhan PWC, one of my favorite opaque greens. It's watercolor. Many people ask, is it gouache, is it acrylics? No, it's watercolor, just straight out of the tube, and it's a watercolor that is opaque. So, you get watercolors that are transparent, semi-transparent, semi-opaque, opaque. This one is opaque. This is how I choose my highlight colors. I choose colors that are opaque and they fit what I need, okay? So what this does is establish some of the highlights that you are able to see on the golf cart. Within the shadows, you're able to see some parts of this backpack or whatever it is catching the light, some of the bats, the golf bats. Is it bat? Do you call these bats? I forgot. Golf, what do you call these? Golf clubs, sorry, my bad. The golf clubs, that's funny. I'm proud of remembering at the end. But the golf clubs you see there catch a bit of the light, so you want to make sure you get all of these details in. Painting around these would honestly be a nightmare. They're also not fully white or fully opaque. It's actually a mid value, but I'm exaggerating it a bit. Now remember, exaggerations, when you aim for realism, you're limited with just how much exaggeration you can get away with. Okay, so it's one more thing to have in mind. You need to be a little more accurate when you aim for that kind of realism. But in any case, yeah, here it is, the final result. I'm going to just sign this one. I really hope this process conveys what is required to get a realistic impression, and I've chosen a very simple, in a way, reference, because it's not a person, it's not a face, it's not an organic shape, it's golf cart, which makes it a little easier for me to paint. Of course, you'll have different subjects that are easier for you to paint. Now I'm removing the tape, obviously, but yeah, it's really just about practicing becoming more accurate in all of the aspects I described earlier. values accurate, colors accurate. All of these small individual elements come together to create a realistic impression. And the more you can improve them, the better your impression will be. I hope you enjoyed this one. I hope you enjoyed the final result. And now we can wrap it up face to face. So thank you so much for watching once again. This is my process for creating realism. I find it is something that takes a little longer. It takes a bit more observation, taking it slowly. It's not my go-to style. It's not the thing I paint the most, but I do from time to time enjoy the challenge, and I do think I'll make more of these in the near future. Now, if you want to learn how to paint like me, not necessarily realistically, but just getting the result you want and letting go and enjoying the process, as always, be sure to check out the frustration-free watercolor course, the link in the description box below. Now, I did want to update you really quick. I am still working on the How to Simplify course. It's going to be delayed. As I mentioned, it's going to take some more time than expected, but I am working on it. I've not forgotten it. It's going to be completely free, okay? And I know you'd love it. So now let's wrap it up, and I will talk to you again in the next video real soon.